Well, usually we'd be having Jacoby in the seat here talking about the Gamer's Den and all that he's got going on. But unfortunately, there are some things going on in his life, and I know things going on in Siren's life as well. So hopefully they'll be joining us again next week since we love their conversation about gamers and the Gamer's Den and all of that. And I've got one of my partners in crime that was able to make it. So I'm very glad that Kara Oker is here with us, deep in roots health coaching and all of that. So we've got one of the partners in crime with us, and definitely glad to have her coming and joining us. So like I said, we will definitely be missing Jatovi on this particular day. But we've got some filmmakers, and I do love the filmmaking community, so I'm looking forward to that conversation and all of that. So definitely, it may be an abbreviated edition of the Gamers Den, but we definitely would not want to do disservice to these amazing guests that Jatovi has given us and all of that. So, Kara, how are you doing? I know that you're actually not in your usual position of being in Ohio. You're actually visiting family and celebrating your birthday and all of that. So we are glad that that is going on. Glad you gave us time on your birthday.
Yes, thank you. Am I still echoing?
Not as much, but there's a little bit.
Okay, great. We'll work with that. So, no, it's so good to be here. Yeah, it's a little crazy week for everyone. But I'm down here in Louisville, just a couple hours south of me. So, just spending time with family. I'm fully vaccinated now, and it's just good to finally see people after being away for so long. And I think that a lot of people can relate. Um, I also know it's a luxury to be able to see the people you love. So definitely not taking that lightly at all. So, but it's definitely good to be here and good to see you guys.
Oh, yeah.
And we have guests, which is amazing. We have amazing guests.
Yeah, we do have some amazing guests. In fact, I'll bring one of the guests. I've had the pleasure of meeting her before, and she's a young filmmaker. But we love talking to filmmakers, and particularly, I think she might even be in the gaming community, or at least a fan of gaming. But let's find out a little bit more about Bianca Mitchell, who's an amazing filmmaker. Had the pleasure of meeting her on a couple of these shows, and I am definitely a fan of all the work that you're doing. So definitely, you're doing some great work as a young filmmaker. So definitely love to hear you share some of your story and what you're about, and even if you are into gaming, because like I said, I'm not even sure if you're into the gaming world or not, or whether this is a something that can be tied in to filmmaking, because I know a lot of times filmmakers and game developers sometimes have a lot in common in that creative space.
Yeah, I'm Bianca Mitchell. I am 16. I'm a Latina filmmaker. I create films. I'm working on the Mad Woman's game right now, which is a documentary about women in chess. It's gaining a lot of speed, and I'm really excited to announce more about that soon. But for the gaming part, yes, I am a part of the gaming community. I would say I've been playing games since maybe second grade with my aunties and my family. I actually am a Twitch streamer, and I have quite a few games on my PC.
Oh, wow. What are some of your favorite games? Because like I said, I didn't not even know you were a gamer. And I've actually been fascinated by some of the Twitchers that I've seen out there, because I've seen them doing all kinds of things, sometimes definitely promoting their products, but sometimes they're just doing the whole games. Because I know there's one that I saw recently that was in the African American space. So Story Mode Bay, I believe is her name. And she plays a lot of different games, including Among Us.
Yeah. My favorite games are Minecraft, and then I like a lot of horror story mode games. So I'm actually working on, I'm playing the We Happy Few. I don't know if you guys heard that, but that's a pretty good game. I Bendy the Ink Machine, things that are like pretty popular with my age group.
Okay. Well, I wasn't familiar with any of those games because, like I said, Jacoby has taught me a lot about the gaming world. So, as have my nephews, because they are they'll be 12 and 13 in August. So, they've definitely taught me about games that I did not know, like Roadblock and things of that nature. So, share with us about those two games that you just mentioned, because you just totally blew my mind. I'm sitting there going, like, I have no clue what these games are.
Yeah.
So if you could share a little bit about those games and a little bit about.
Sorry. Yeah. So, Minecraft is more of a creative, fun game. You can play with your friends, play by yourself. You can do strategy games in public lobbies, and then you get to create things with blocks, things like that. And then for the We Happy Few, it's like a futuristic game, but kind of old. It's like a mixture of both times, and the world is ending. There's a pandemic, and a pandemic of sadness. So they forget all their past, and the past was very rough for them. So they decide to start forgetting it, and they start taking these happy pills to forget things. But these happy pills are causing problems for people. But if you don't take them, then you're a downer. So it's a whole thing. It's more horror. And then the Bendy and the Ink Machine is like a cartoony game, cartoony horror. It's like Mickey Mouse's creation studio, and so they Bendy is the little devil that's in cartoons, like old cartoons, and they decide to bring him to life, to like have a whole amusement park, but things go wrong and he starts taking over and trying to ink and ink people and turn into ink monsters. So yeah, I think that's like the best ways to explain it.
No, that was a great explanation. I was thoroughly impressed with that explanation and everything. So definitely a great explanation. I'm going to bring in our other guest, Christopher, but I'd love to hear about this chess movie that you're part of as well.
Yeah, it's actually my movie. I'm creating it. I've been developing it since January. I have some of the best chess players in the entire world, such as Jennifer Shahadi, to Alexander Lopez, other people. And then we're working on getting distributors right now. So it's exciting.
Sounds really good and everything. Hey, Christopher, glad that you're here. Glad that you were able to make it. I know Jotovia told me that you were involved in the movie industry as well, since we're calling this Gamers Den Goes to the Movies. So definitely share us a little bit about your background and your story. Like I said, Jotovia unfortunately had some things going on in his life, so he wasn't able to make it. So we're kind of pinch hitting his team that he's got behind him. So that's me. That's Kara Oker, who you see in the room as well. Usually Siren is here with us as well, but she's got some things going on in her life also. So we're trying to definitely, life things happen and folks have to deal with life tragedies. So if you could share a little bit about your filmmaking background as well.
Yeah, sure. And I am old friends with Jatovi. I used to perform improv with him back in the day. Yeah, my journey started as a kid growing up. I'm definitely not 16 or 17. I'm I'm old AF, as the kids say. And I grew up when the original Star Wars came out, and Star Wars really influenced me as a filmmaker. It made me realize how a movie can make an impression on you, can make you, feel like there's, these expansive worlds and world building. And it sort of grew my interest in how these movies were made, how special effects were made, how to tell a story. Because if you can create something that creates that kind of impression on the audience, whether it makes them jump, whether it makes them cry, makes them laugh, I mean, that's a great feeling to have, to be able to do that. And I know this is a gamer's den, and I'm actually an old school gamer. I'm old enough to have been around when they had arcades, and I had my first home system was a Sears Pong, which really shows my age. But I had the first Nintendo on the block, where all the kids came to my house to play the early Nintendo. I've had most of these systems since then, and a lot of my early games were like Castlevania, Metroid. A lot of the early ones, Halo was a big thing for me. I'm also big into horror games. I'm currently playing the Resident Evil Village game, and like most guys, fawning over the vampire women. But yeah, I'm a huge fan, and I really got into filmmaking. I did filmmaking throughout a lot of my early life, but I didn't take it seriously until later. When I started submitting to like film festivals, like around 2007. I've made mostly a lot of horror shorts, which have won awards, screened at film festivals all across the country and outside the country. And right now I'm currently working on a segment for a horror anthology, a travel horror anthology called Worst Laid Plans, where it's all those segments about horror that takes place when people are traveling or on vacation. And I'm currently working on that. We did a really great crowdsourcing campaign that we raised money for. And so right now we're just trying to secure locations. Right now we did a casting call for actors. And we're just trying to work on possibly filming that probably late July. So that's kind of exciting, but a little bit different because most of the times I'm making films on my own dime. I'm usually calling the shots, and to be working under producers and that kind of thing makes me a little bit stressed. But it's those growing pains you have to go into when you sort of want to move beyond what you've done before. So.
Oh, no doubt about that. And I can definitely relate to Pong. I remember Pong too, the game where you would sit there and get that ball to try to break through the wall and all of that. And it was actually a very tedious game sometimes after you got into the hang of it. But it
Yeah.
was the early versions of video games. What are some of the video games that you're into now? Some of the more modern video games?
Well, I mean, I think I mentioned like a Resident Evil game, Silent Hill. I was a big fan of Until Dawn. I really like games that sort of like transport you and make you feel like you're part of a story. I think that's why I was always a big fan of Halo, because there's just moments where it goes from the cutscenes to the game, and to where you feel like you're immersed in it. And Until Dawn is, I love that because it's almost like a choose your own adventure video game, to where your decisions sort of change up how the story plays out, what characters die, and because there's like a million different like iterations as to how that plays out. I love that. So I usually like those that have a little bit of storytelling. Of course, I've played about every Star Wars game known to man, like Battlefront 2 and those type of things. Or I've played a little bit of the VR games, what's it, and I can't, my mind's brain farting, but the ones with the lightsabers, you dance to the beat, Beat Saber.
Right.
So yeah, so I don't know. I played a little bit of everything, which is weird because I make horror films, but I'm probably the biggest scaredy cat. So because I was almost going to start Twitch streaming me playing Resident Evil, because I know that would be probably entertaining, just me like, talking to the screen like, oh, I'm not going in there. It's like, oh, there's blood that leads to this doorway. I do not want to go that way because I know there's something going to scare the hell out of me. So, but yeah, I mean, a lot of horror games I'm into.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of talking to some horror filmmakers, and that's one of the questions I always ask them, because I never can understand that. And I'm actually not the biggest fan of horror movies, just because I can be a scaredy cat as well. And I'm sitting there going like, they told you the shark was in the ocean. Why are you going into the ocean? It never makes logical sense to me why they send the people when they know that something's going on there. So maybe you as filmmakers, Christopher and Bianca, can explain this to me, because I'm like, you saw the last person go down the steps. He did not come back, or he came back and he was a zombie. I don't think you want to go down those steps, but that's just me and a logical thinking individual. But maybe you explain why we do these things. So, Bianca, why do we even bother going down the steps when we know it's a bad place to go?
First, I'd like to say it surprised me when you said that Star Wars inspired you to be a filmmaker, because it's the same for me, honestly. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I memorized all of the Empire Strikes Back movies script when I was in elementary school. I used to watch it every single day to school. But I know a lot of filmmakers are like, oh, well, don't watch Star Wars. It's not, it's not whatever they say. And a lot of the times when you take film classes, they won't show it to you because of that. And I that's awesome that you like that. And then for the horror, I'm the exact same way. I'm a scaredy cat, but I love horror. I think a lot of the times when movies do that, like send them down the stairs or to the sharks, I think it's to build suspense and make you mad and make your stomach drop. Like, oh my God, like, why are they going there?
Most horror films would be 5 minutes long if people logically did what you'd
Yeah.
normally do in those situations, like going down in the basement or going to some dark place or hearing a sound and going towards that sound or leaving your weapon on the floor. A lot of those are definitely storytelling things that create suspense and atmosphere and that kind of thing. But yeah, you sometimes you have to throw logic a little bit outside the door if you're going to make it a good story, because otherwise, if people would just stay in their comfort zone and not seek out
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, that's
yeah.
It wouldn't be a horror movie if people did things logically. So yeah, I love that answer because I do wonder, like, oh, why do these people do that? Well, it's the story. You have to build the story, and you're telling a story, and so yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
definitely
mean,
agree with you.
well, and it's like, and I run against that a lot when it comes to writing stories. It's because I do try to put the logic into it, but at the same time, you at some point you have to realize, that's the reason movies are there. If movies were about the mundane, um, if it was like our normal daily activities, it would be boring. That's why they edit, reality shows to be more entertaining. They take
Yeah.
snippets of this one line and add it to this line to make it more dramatic when essentially it probably wasn't, or they just make them redo a scene to make it more dramatic, because life in general can be very boring, monotonous. And that's what films are there. You have to have a little suspension of disbelief and stuff to sort of for it to be entertaining, because you want your movies to be more entertaining than your own life, or more scary than your own life, because that's what makes people react the way they do, make them or sometimes make them react, scream at the screen. Or I do that in my living room a lot of times, like, why are you going in there? Why are you being stupid?
I think a lot of movies also are kind of cheesy. Like those are like said to be scary, but they're not really scary because you see the monster. I think a lot of the suspenseful horror movies that do really well are the ones that you don't see the monster and you kind of just hear things. Like some best horror movies that wouldn't be considered horror, like the cheesy horror, would be, As Above, So Below, Blair Witch Project, where you can't see them. They're creating it in their mind.
Well, a lot of times what we recreate in our mind can be more twisted and weird and scary than what they can put on the screen. And so anytime you can sort of build to that, I mean, it's like the whole story about Jaws, how initially you were supposed to see the shark a whole lot more throughout the film, but because of problems with the shark, they had to sort of keep it, under the water a lot. And so the mystery of knowing some kind of evil forces out there to get you is more scary than just showing the monster up front. So yeah, I think it is kind of helpful to do that. And a lot of that has to do with how you tell the story and that kind of thing. But yeah, but at the same time also, like, comedy horror is subjective too. What scares one person may not scare another.
Yeah.
No, that's very much true. And one of the things I remember my dad, who's still living, showed me one time, and it was one of those horror movies that you're talking about. It wasn't Jaws, but it was another classic movie where you could see literally that the shark or whatever the monster was made of cardboard. So it kind of took away a little bit of the allure of the monster, because you're sitting there going like, wait a minute, that's not really scary because it's made of something that we're not really buying as the monster. So I remember him pointing that out to me. He's like, no, I'm not buying this monster because it doesn't even look realistic. Christopher, you talked about the fact that Jacoby from the world of improv. How is the world of improv related to your filmmaking, and definitely how do you bring that into your filmmaking community?
Well, growing up, I was a big fan of like Whose Line Is It Anyway, and the early iterations, like the BBC version before they had the more American version. And I think I initially went into it just to help me to think on my feet and to sort of like help create stories and stuff. Because, I think sometimes we get bogged down in when you're telling stories, you're writing, like, how is this supposed to play out? And sort of to be a little bit more freeform in how you go about it and creating ideas and being more imaginative. I did that. And also I sort of wanted to get outside my comfort zone because to be honest, I deal with a little bit of a social anxiety So to do that, I think it was a little bit freeing, and I did improv for 7 years. Towards the end, I was like teaching classes. I also learned the art of long form improv. Took classes in what the IO, which is in Chicago, which a lot of famous comedians went through, like Tina Fey and that kind of thing. Took those classes. I also was on a musical improv team where we made songs, which for me was like even more stressful and crazy. But for me, it was a challenge. So I mainly went into it just to help with, help me not get so bogged down in the monotony of sort of like how our minds work, and try to like just get out there and just come up with stuff. Basically just to help me to create ideas more easily, and not be so bogged down in the logic of everything. So yeah, and it was fun performing with Jatovi and doing that kind of stuff back in the day. But also when I left that, I realized, that improv, it happens and it's gone. With film, I can make it. It's always going to be out there for people to see. And sometimes I think also improvisation helps you as a filmmaker, because when you're filming stuff, sometimes you have things that happen that change the story or change your ability to film things, and so you have to be able to improvise to be able to tell that story. And sometimes you come up with stuff even more interesting. It's like the whole story about Harrison Ford when he did Indiana Jones, and he was sick that day, and he, instead of fighting the guy, he shoots him because he just wanted to end it, and it ended up being like one of the most famous moments in movie history, and that was improvised. So I think it's very helpful in creativity to be able to think on your feet and just get out there and come up with stuff, because sometimes it's easier than trying to sort of like think logically,
I have a question for you, Mr. Christopher.
Yeah.
Are you a director, writer?
I'm a director, writer, producer. I also
Okay.
edit my stuff as well. I mean, I'm hard on myself as a writer.
I feel as though filmmaker kind of means everything.
It can. I mean, I know that you have some filmmakers that, like I used to write my stuff when I started. I wrote all my stuff, and then like I worked on a film called Foodie with this novel writer named Eric Pruitt, who wrote the initial screenplay. And that was the first time that I worked with someone and adapted his screenplay and changed it and added my stuff to it. So that became a learning process, and not just having one mindset, and also working with someone who might have different ideas than you. And the same thing with like my producer from my film Backward Creep, which is, we're going to turn into a feature probably later in the year, hopefully, which has won all kinds of awards and stuff. My producer on that, I'm working with her on a script for a feature, and also she's helping me on my segment in the horror anthology. And so it's been very interesting how she did her initial pass on, we're adapting. So this is even weirder. We're adapting from a story from a book to adapt it for ourselves. And she did the initial pass, and then I went on and added my stank to it, as they say, and then added my elements to it. And then she went back over it, did her pass on it, and gave some thoughts and ideas on it that actually made me realize, okay, well, maybe I need to add more of this, because I ended up being more jokey than what I needed to be. And I need to go back and add a little bit of heart to it. So I think that collaborative process when it comes to the creation of it is kind of cool. But yeah, I think as a filmmaker, you have to think within the realm of the storytelling with the script, even if you didn't write it, because you got to bring that script to a visual medium and make it work. Because sometimes stuff that works on a page may not work so well when it comes to putting it on a screen.
Hey, Christopher, real quick, and I wanted to hear right back.
I think Bianca was about to add something to that, Mark, if you don't mind.
Yeah, don't mind at all.
I have two things. So for the improv, I wanted to add on something. I know acting and improv help a lot with directors and creators. When you're directing a lot of actors, you need to know how they're feeling. I've directed on sets, and a lot of the times it's good that I have acting experience, so I'm able to explain to my actors how I want something. In improv, I worked on the New Mexico Ice Wolves, which is a hockey team in New Mexico, and I did a lot of the live broadcasting and directing there. and I needed to hop onto something really fast. So improv comes in really well. If you need to do something quickly, you need to jump on it really fast and feel open to changing. And then with having a team, I completely agree. I haven't done my own narrative yet. I'm working on a documentary. And I think it's amazing having my producers on and my team on board because they give me so much ideas and it's all kind of a collaborative story. And the project kind of takes a life of itself. It becomes like this own monster that starts moving by itself. It's really cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's like because sometimes people see documentaries differently than normal,
Yeah.
storytelling, but it's the same thing because you're taking all these elements in, and you have to craft a story using all those elements. You have to make those into puzzle pieces that fit together. And sometimes in the process of telling that story, you might tell a different story than what you initially started out telling. Because there's a lot of documentaries that went into other areas because of just
like
interviewing and stuff. So
like Tiger, have you guys seen Tiger King on Netflix?
Yeah, that's a good example of that.
One that's a crazy docuseries. It started with just snakes, and then he realized that people were selling tigers, and then realized he found these whole people and started getting these stories, and it just created its own life form off of snakes.
Wow. Christopher, and this is actually tying in to Kara and the work that she does because she's a health coach and has this great podcast called Deep in Roots and everything. Could you talk a little bit about Foodies? Because Foodies is about the culture of the culinary environment and that whole food culture that has developed over the last several years. So I'd love for you to go a little bit into more detail about what that is about. And maybe Kara may have some questions revolving around that as well, as she is a great health coach and all of that. So definitely I was going to have you talk a little bit about Foodies, that particular movie that you were involved in.
Yeah, it's called Foodie. You can view it on YouTube. I think we made it in 2012, I think. But it's Eric Pruitt who actually came up with the initial idea. He worked as a restaurant manager. He actually manages a bar in like Hillsborough, North Carolina right now. I think it's called the Yonder. And he based a lot of it just dealing with people, because when you deal with foodie culture, there's always those different aspects of it. And the film is basically about this guy who's like a manager at a local restaurant, and he gets invited to this underground dinner. And then finds out he's the entree. Just basically how like the foodie culture has gotten to the point now where everybody wants to try all these new delicacies and all this gastronomy and all these different things that you could easily see us getting to the point where like, I wonder what human meat would taste like, because he actually met someone who was talking about all these weird animals, these rare animals and stuff they ate. So yeah, and I think when he goes to the dinner party, there's like all these different people that you find in foodie culture. There's the meat person who's all about how you make meat. There's a woman who owns a local wine place called the Wine Dungeon, where she's very sadomasochistic or whatever, but she's all about pairing the right wine with your food. There's the food blogger, who's always just being overly critical of stuff. So you have all these different facets of foodie culture, and they're all dinner guests, and they've all invited this guy so that they could eat pieces of them, and then it goes off a little bit off the rails when he realizes what's happening. So it's very horror comedy-ish. There's a lot of references I do not understand because I'm not in foodie culture, and that's all Eric. It's not me. So there's stuff in there I don't know what this is. I don't even know what this food is. But it seemed to really hit a chord with people who saw it. I still have people every once in a while mention there's actually a chef who got our poster tattooed on her arm. Whoa. So I mean, to me, that's the biggest compliment when you can create something for a film and they actually put it in their flesh for the rest of their lives. So, but yeah, it was a cool process. It was probably one of the bigger films for me that started my journey as a filmmaker, because we got a lot of awards, and we were mentioned the New Yorker posted an online article about cannibal films, and they featured our movie, I was like, wow, that's pretty cool.
I don't know.
Yeah, I had nothing to add to that regarding my profession as a health coach. However, that sounds very hostile. I think, was it the second movie or like the third? I don't know, but one of them really like actually revolved around cannibalism too at the end. So it sounds like hostile. And I actually would totally watch that movie because that's very interesting. But yeah, it has nothing to do with health coaching. Nice try, Mark Lee.
I tried to help
I
you. Don't
do not
segue you
promote
in there.
cannibalism and as part of your diet or any ethical practices here.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with mangas or like, and there's actually quite a few mangas out there about these type of things. I don't remember exactly what their names are, but there is one where there's actually two. So one where this kid goes down into a basement and realizes it gets kidnapped, and they like tie him up and start force feeding him, and they're getting him ready to be eaten by people. And it's weird. And then there's another one, exact same thing, where they walk into, a secret bar, and all of a sudden there's it's like a party, and then they're the course. It's actually an anime. That one's more of like, yeah, but it's crazy to people like watching this type of things.
Well, I mean, actually, I'm a big fan of. I don't know if you heard of Junji Ito when it comes to mangas.
Yes.
He did a thing called Spiral, and he's very horror oriented, and he has some of the most disturbing visuals you'll see. Actually, my film Backward Creep, our short film, which we're going to turn into a feature, it was influenced a little bit by Junji Ito.
Oh my! I've never met somebody that's been into that.
Yeah, because our monster is actually based on the story of Backward Creep is about these group of anime cosplayers who go into an anime convention, and they saw this cursed manga page that when you read it, our villain, the Shirogul, shows up and steals your eyes. And our monster, the way that she's created, was a little bit influenced. There's another Asian artist, I think, on Instagram that we based some of the ideas on, but a little bit was based on Junji Ito and his stuff involving body horror and that kind of thing. So
he's one of my favorite artists. Yeah, a lot of my art is off that as well.
I've read all this stuff. I had some friends that had some of his compilations of stuff, and
I want his books so badly.
He's very disturbing. Some of his visuals are like, oh, that's creepy. This guy must not be well in the head to come up with these ideas. But and I don't think any movie could really sort of bring to full
his art.
Yeah, what he can do and those pages of his art.
Hey, Bianca, how much do other types of art influence you? Because I'm thinking about like filmmakers that are influenced by visual artists or musicians or other styles of art. So how much of the other art forms actually influence what you're doing?
So I'm a multimedia artist. So I actually do a lot of digital work. And that's what inspires, sorry. I'm like nervous. But a lot of the times, Picasso is one of my biggest, forms of inspiration, with his cubism. I like making films because it breaks down into cubism. I like that a lot. And a lot of the times it's mostly just movies. I rarely look at artists. I do have a lot of artists, but they're always on Instagram and I never remember their names.
What about you, Christopher? How do other art forms influence you as well?
I mean, lately there's been a lot of artists that I've come across on like Instagram, and I can't remember the person's name, but there's an Asian artist who does a lot of things involving, like, he has heads with all eyeballs inside of it, or just does really things just weird sort of puzzle like things involving the human body that I really love, which is very influential on our villain in Backward Creep. But I mean, it's interesting how filmmakers are really how, I mean, I think there's a video online where it shows a lot of scenes from movies that were influenced by famous pieces of art. It's really interesting how filmmakers, there's actually a documentary about William Friedkin, who wrote The Exorcist, about the making of it. I think you can find it on Shudder if you have that streaming service. But in that film, he talks about how he learned lighting for his films based on, I think there's an artist named Caravaggio. Caravaggio is probably one of the most well-known artists when it comes to, he almost like has cinematic lighting in his art, even though cinema didn't exist back then. Just the way he uses the way light shadows on the face, and almost like there's some kind of light source that kind of shines on his subjects. And so I think there's a lot of times that I'll use those type of things, or I'll see a piece of art, and I really want to sort of imitate that when it comes to setting up shots. And I think as I've grown as a filmmaker, I've definitely want my films to have a little bit more style to it than what they've had in the past. I mean, some of my favorite directors, like Tim Burton and stuff, always have this sort of huge sense of style, and you can always tell it's their type of film. And that's what I'm hoping I'm growing towards, is trying to sort of create my own impression as a filmmaker and be more artful with the creation of scenes, to where it just doesn't feel very simple, and the lighting and the framing of the subject matter. So
another thing that also inspires me with a lot of my films and art is stills photography. I like the colors, the way that it's shot. A lot of the times I use that, even if it's super absurd. I like it. And a lot of I don't know if you, most of you guys probably watch this, but Saw is a lot of things. I think it's so demented that I like it.
Yeah, the new one they try to take in a different direction that just came out.
What kind of different direction did they try to take it? Because I remember the original one, and that it was disturbing enough. So what direction did they try to take the new one in?
Well, the guy who directed it actually directed some of the earlier Saw films. I think they took the subject matter in a different direction, to where a lot of the victims are more connected. It's more, and because I think most of the Saw films are about like all these individual people dealing with their own sins, and this one you have basically there's a current themes today where you deal with a lot of the this people in this police force, and they've all are connected in some way, dealing with their own sins and crimes that they've tried to sweep under the rug. And of course, the Saw thing comes around to sort of reveal those and make them pay for their sins. And so I think that's, to me, it's a little bit more, the subject matter is a little bit more interesting, even though it fulfills the same Saw thing of people being, I'm not a big fan of torture porn per se, but
I like the first one. That's
yeah. So, but I think it definitely takes it a different, because it's more of a spin-off of Saw. It's not really the normal Saw thing, because it's a different Saw villain, I guess. But it's different in that respect.
Hey, Bianca, I know one of the things that Jatovia oftentimes talks about on this show, and it actually something that your film deals with, is trying to get more diversity. And I know that's part of what your chess film is about. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about your thoughts about diversity in the film industry, particularly with women filmmakers, but also how that relates to your movie, because your movie is about, if I remember correctly, women chess players, and the fact that they don't necessarily always get the attention that they should get.
I think diversity, I'll talk about film first. I think it's very limited. As a Chicana, I have not, usually I'm stuck in a stereotype of making the spicy Latina or the telenovelas. I can never, a lot of the times that happens, or even women in film, it's still, I rarely see it. We rarely see directors. We rarely see it top of the line women filmmakers. And so that's what I made my film. I want to really diversify chess as well, because it's the exact same way, where there are more men in chess than women, because women get pushed out. And so there's actually never been a feature-length documentary about women in chess ever. There's little bits and pieces in documentaries about women in chess, but never a full thing. And so I want to make a documentary that's fully about women in chess and these amazing role models that I did not know about when I was in elementary playing chess. Wow. And a lot of the times, elementary is when little girls drop out of chess. And Bobby Fischer, like Gary Kasparov. I knew those when I was little, but I never knew that there were women chess players out there. And so this documentary is really about pushing it out there, and so that young women know that they're out there.
Along those
And
same lines, and just along those same lines, Bianca, sometimes people, when they think about the Latina community, the Latin community, the Chicano community, and everything, they think of that there's like that are able to give you the diversity that you want. I don't necessarily agree that, just like I don't think that BET is the be all to end all for all black films and all black TV programming. But you do have some folks that try to put you in those boxes, whether it's BET or OWN or whether it's Univision in the Latin community. So, what is your answer to those that are trying to think that those efforts to diversify are good enough?
I mean, you see Netflix, they're trying hard right now, but I think there's still a stereotype stuck to us with being, spicy, and not really spicy, but like sassy. And I think that's horrible because that we have to, follow that. I think it's awesome what Netflix and all these other platforms are doing to help Latinas and Latino community. A lot of the times, these studios don't want to tell our stories. There's actually a huge push on that. And a lot of the times it's also, sorry, I'm thinking of how to put my words together. With not wanting to tell our stories, it either needs to be a white savior or somebody like in that form. We can't tell our own stories. Somebody else has to tell for us.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I can definitely agree with you that there needs to be more voices like yours. What are some of the ways that you're trying to develop other young voices? Like I said, you're definitely a young voice yourself in the under 20 category, but how are you trying to use your own platform to develop other voices within your community?
I think I want to become a Latina filmmaker, but making my own way to show other Chicanas and Latinas that they can make what they want. And as I grow with my filmmaking, I do want to start platforms to help and donate to these, these women, and more opportunities for them as well, where they can come and join a group of people. Like in New Mexico, it's the Chicano filmmakers program, and so they help a lot of. And then there's also the Latina filmmakers program. A lot of stuff like that.
Sounds like a great idea. I actually had the pleasure yesterday of interviewing a woman whose father was one of the early African American filmmakers in like the 40s or the 30s in terms of like the Chitlin circuit. And when he was living, I think he was originally from like the New York area, but then he moved to Los Angeles. So he actually did some films, including one about the atom bomb. It was done as a satire type deal and everything, but it was about the atom bomb. But I know that Miss Green was sharing her father's story, Ernest Green, who was an early filmmaker. And that's one of the things that she said was that he felt that one of his things that he would be disappointed about in modern culture is that we haven't gone far enough. Because, like I said, he actually owned his own studio in the 40s, and there still are not enough in a lot of people's minds studios and gatekeepers in
Yes.
the various minority communities. So that's one of the things she said, and she's a grandma herself, because that's the reason she's doing these films, is because she wants to leave a legacy for her grandson, so that he would know who his great grandfather was.
I think if people above the line in Hollywood start actually supporting these causes, things would change. I think a lot of things need to change in the film community, in the industry a lot in Hollywood and other communities as well, where it just needs to be inclusive and not really, most of the times I'm in meetings with white old men, and I'm just like, this is who's filled the community. Why isn't there more diversity? And plus, it's also on screen. A lot of the Chicanas and other people of color, have stereotypes stuck to them. So when you're going in to audition, you have to fit those stereotypes to play the character. Why is there stereotypes in the first place?
Very good point. Christopher, what are some of the things that you would like to see change in the movie industry if you had like some magic ability to change things? You've been in the game for a while now. You're a veteran in the game. So what are some of the things that you would like to see changed?
Well, I mean, there needs to be more inclusivity, with people of color, sexual orientations, any of that kind of stuff. There needs to be that. And, it's a slow process, and we're starting to see that a little bit more. I mean, I have a few filmmaker friends, Latina filmmakers such as Lou Simon and Gigi Saw Guerrera that I'm really excited about, how they're getting out there and getting their stuff done, despite, how Hollywood is. And I think, yeah, I think the main thing is, yeah, I'd love to see a lot more inclusion with directing. I mean, I don't know if you, Mark, if you remember Project Greenlight. It was a series that came on many years ago on HBO, and where they gave people who you sent in a script, and then based on that script, it was like a contest where they let you direct it, and then the whole series about the process of directing. And those 3 seasons was white men. I think they had one season where the woman wrote the script, but they're coming back with Project Greenlight, and it's going to be female filmmakers only.
Oh wow!
So I think that's a really exciting opportunity. I think because I think the main thing is seeing more of it. It's going to be more acceptable and being more open about it, because I think we don't see it as much. You know what I mean? Because I think a lot of times we just see when it comes to filmmakers, you only see certain people.
Yes.
And a lot of times there's certain things that are made and you don't realize, oh, that was directed by a female, that was directed by a person of color. You don't think about that. And it would be nice to get to the point where we don't have to have this conversation about having opportunities. I know for me, I would love to be able to get to the point, because, I shouldn't be talking because I'm a white filmmaker, but as a white male filmmaker, I want to be able to give more opportunities to other people in the future. If I can ever have my own production company, I would want to be able to open opportunities for persons of color, for women filmmakers. I want to be able to be that kind of person, because maybe I might be able to open doors that other people might not be able to do. And even diversity in casting and stuff. I think and even like writing, that's one of the reasons I wanted to write with my collaborator Amanda Stone. I wanted a female perspective. I didn't want to be my old man crusty ideas of how characters are, and I want a female perspective on things. And when we make our feature film of Backward Creep, I went out of my way to make sure it's a diverse cast of different people, because I have friends that are in the cosplay community, and they're not all white men, not all white people, they're not all people of the same, heterosexual types. There's different people, non-binary people of different backgrounds. I wanted that to reflect, or even I'm even working. I want to make sure one of those characters is a person with some type of disability as well, because you don't see that in films as much. A lot of times, I know in certain situations it's kind of hard to do that, but certain times actors are given awards for playing disabled people. It'd be nice to see a disabled person be able to play something, or just be a normal character, to where it's not all about their sexual orientation. It's not all about their disability. It's not all about the color of their skin. It's just about them just being a normal character in a movie. And I'd love for us to get to that point, and hopefully I just want more opportunities for storytelling where it's not all the same type of stories. And it's not about being woke. It's more about telling what our culture is about now, because everything's much more multicultural. There's so many different viewpoints, and we need to have that in our storytelling. Otherwise you're wearing blinders when it comes to telling your story. So yeah, I think I would just hope that there's more opportunities for that. And I know I'm trying to work on myself to make sure that, because a lot of times you don't think about like, oh, wow, maybe I need to tell more perspectives on that. And then by doing that, you try to get more people from those communities to be a part of what you're making.
My whole team on the Mad Woman's game is actually women.
Oh, nice.
I have one executive producer that's a male, but everybody on my team is women. I have people of color on my team, women of color. And another thing is, you guys watched The Queen's Gambit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or heard of it? Okay, so you know how it's a woman's story. Yeah. Well, it was directed, written, and consulted by men.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's why this also my documentary is just so pushing in the chess community, is because these stories about women are not even directed by women or consulted by women chess players.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like what you're saying is it's similar to the argument that folks had against Steven Spielberg when he did The Color Purple, because a lot of folks were saying that while they know that that's a classic movie, they wish that it had been directed by somebody within the African American community,
Yes.
and not necessarily Steven Spielberg, because that would have given it a different perspective and all of that. And I think they said the same about, to some degree, Roots and some of the other classic movies that, if not primarily directed by European Americans, at least had a lot of their power decisions made at that level from that community.
That actually goes back to what I was talking about. Studios don't like you telling your own stories. They want somebody else to. You know, it's not necessarily gender or anything. Gender, people of color, you know, women. They don't know how to explain it in the right way, but you know what I mean?
And it seems to me one of the things you're saying that needs to be done, and I'd love to hear both of your thoughts about this, is that more people need to actually create their own. That's part of what you're doing. Yeah, because you have your own company and everything of that nature. And it sounds to me like even you, Christopher, are doing that as well. Because I think that sometimes we depend too much on the big power companies, even in radio, which I'm part of. That's been one of the big beefs about radio, is that it's now owned, whether it's on the nonprofit side or the profit side, by 3 or 4 major entities, the Clear Channels and the Radio Ones of the world. And that means that what you hear in New Mexico, I'll probably hear the same thing here in Durham, North Carolina. So because they're all under one monopoly, and they may not think of themselves as a monopoly, but in a lot of ways they are. So what kind of suggestions and encouragement would you both give to folks that want to get into the movie making industry, to either create their own or just to dive into it? So if folks are listening on the Gamers Den and they wanted to get into movie making, what advice would you give them?
I'll go first. I would say just keep creating. Don't be afraid to ask people. For just keep asking, keep talking, keep creating connections. That is the best way to create a film and create a community of people who are going to support you. And if you want to tell your story, don't be afraid to.
What about you, Christopher?
Don't wait for somebody to tell you yes.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I think that's the thing. I mean, not everybody has that luxury of some wonderful opportunity dropping in our laps. And luckily, you know, especially for a lot of the younger generation, you have an easier opportunity to make films than it was back in the day, where you had to make things on film and you had to have more money to make those opportunities happen. You know, and I think also just making connections in your community to be able to make stuff. You know, you don't necessarily have to have the most huge budget in the world to tell your story. It's just mainly about connecting with people that can help make that story come to life. You know, and a lot of that's just getting involved, finding those filmmaking communities in your area. But yeah, now, I mean, you have people that, you know, can make films on their iPhone at this point, you know, because a lot of technology has come to the point where it's much easier to go buy a cheap camera from Best Buy and being able to film it. The thing is, you learn by doing, you know, and you just can't be so hard on yourself to think it's going to be perfect in the very beginning. As a filmmaker and as someone who makes art, you learn through the process and you get better by the process, but you only do that by doing, and you just can't wait for the perfect opportunity. Sometimes you have to make those opportunities happen. And sometimes through the process of creating your art, you get eyeballs on it and you get people that are interested in it and sometimes willing to help you with that stuff. Or maybe you get that opportunity that helps you make something else because they realize the potential in what you're creating.
No, and along those same lines, how important do you think democratization is? Because you just mentioned it, that anybody can get a camera. I've actually just recently, because they've made it available to those folks that have Androids like I do, so they've made that available. So I'm now a part of the Clubhouse family and all of that. And of course, people are jumping on YouTube regularly. So as creatives, how important do you think this whole democratization of the creative process has become?
I mean, I think the main thing is in the creation of art, you know, it's good to get out there and create. And also in the process of that, you realize your strengths and your weaknesses. You know, I could film my own stuff if I wanted to, but it's not going to be as good as my DP, who's better at using the camera than I am. So at some point you have to realize you find those people, those creatives around you that can sort of fit those different facets of making it better as it goes along. I mean, most people's art in the very beginning usually isn't the best sometimes. I mean, sometimes you have those people that just right off the bat, you can sort of tell. But it's all about, and at the same time, just because you have a camera doesn't mean your film's going to be amazing, but at least you're putting your heart and passion into it. And if you look at some of my early stuff, you're like, man, this guy's never going to be a filmmaker. His stuff is crap. So, and I cringe when I look back at it, but again, it's all a learning process. But you don't know until you know, and a lot of that's learning. A lot of I didn't go to film school. My film school was watching special features on DVDs and Blu-rays, watching behind the scenes stuff on YouTube. I mean, a lot of that stuff is how I learned to create. And you have those people whose specialty is in a specific area. And I think the main thing is building to the point where you have a bunch of creatives around you that each have their own strengths, but because each person's strength is the column that helps the whole project stand on its own.
Bianca, how important do you think it is to have that education? Because I've definitely met some filmmakers that were not necessarily college trained or even high school or elementary school trained in filmmaking. So how important do you think it is to have that formal education in filmmaking? Because Christopher, like you were saying, has learned the craft on his own and didn't necessarily go to film school.
I think I honestly don't think it's necessary. I think if you want to start off like USC, if you're in high school and you want to go to even then, I'm not even college yet. I am going to the Central New Mexico Community College and getting my associate's degree in film, but that's because I'm homeschooled. But I think the most biggest thing that you want to do if you want to be a filmmaker is to gain experience. If you gain experience, people will trust you and people will work with you, and you create a community of filmmakers that have the same passion as you. There's a lot of things like film festivals. A lot of times reach out to series. Maybe you can be a PA on a film in your hometown. Like I worked on in 7th grade. I reached out to an Amazon show that was in New Mexico. I reached out to the producers, asked if I could be an intern at 7th grade, which was a college internship, and they said, yeah. I joined the team, and I started gaining experience and started learning from people in the industry. A lot of the times there's showcases with actors, and you meet people there. I think one of the also biggest advice that I got from one of my mentors is it's your art. If people will like it, people will not like it. As long as you like it, who cares? And another thing that I got from my mentor is don't be afraid to get your stuff out there. If you make an art piece, and it could be the best art piece in the world, but if you don't sell it right and nobody watches it, who cares?
And at some point you'll learn to grow thicker skin because everybody's a critic. There's, you can make the best thing in the world. I think Guillermo del Toro once said that, look at the most famous movie you think is perfect and go on IMDb and see the 1-star ratings for it. There's always somebody who thinks The Godfather or any of these famous films are pure horrible crap. And so you just have to deal with that. And then also sometimes you will create haters just by making something that's good. But yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, when it comes to starting out, is just again, get involved with your local community. I mean, I met a filmmaker at a film festival that I made a film that I shot and did everything myself on. I met him. I actually worked on his set. He actually cast me in a part, which is I don't normally like to be in front of the camera. And then he was the DP on my first 2 projects. And the first project, he actually got a co-DP who worked on the TV show Miami Vice. And I'm like, I've got this guy who directed action scenes on a TV show, and he's directing these cheesy parts in my little horror film. And then the DP on his film that he made has been my DP since Foodie. And I've worked with him ever since because he's the kind of person that can make things happen. So, and I've met so many people at film festivals. I mean, I've met effects artists who ended up making effects on my next film. So those connections are very helpful in not only learning the craft, but at the same time making connections that can help you on your future projects.
That makes a lot of sense. And both of you have brought up film festivals, and I've actually been part of a couple of film festivals in the process right now of judging Out South, which is a film festival that deals with the LGBTI, whatever the rest of the letters are, community and everything. But they wanted to get people that were from various cultures involved in the judging. So they picked me, and I've actually the second time judging a film festival associated with the Carolina Theater, because I've also been twice the judge of Nevermore. So definitely had that
Nice.
pleasure of judging film slash suspense films and all of that. So definitely sounds like those film festivals are very important, but they're also going very hybrid, which means that folks might be submitting from Australia to festivals in New Mexico or California or North
That happens.
Carolina or wherever. So definitely, what are your thoughts about film festivals and their importance?
I've actually worked a few film festivals in New Mexico. I've worked the Santa Fe Film Festival, the Sound and Music Film Festival, and I'm actually helping start one right now. It's the um, Enchantment FX Youth Film Festival. I'm a youth ambassador. I think they're really important when you're starting out. Uh, Extremely important, actually. You meet new people, you get to understand a lot more, and you get to take opportunities. Honestly, if you're volunteering there, you do not know who you'll meet. You do not know who you're talking to. I think that's what's so exciting. You get to see films. You get to be inspired. I think when I was working with the Santa Fe Film Festival, they gave me a pass to the film VIP, and I got in there because I was volunteering, and I met filmmakers from all over the United States. I've met filmmakers from Seattle who are making featured films that they're sending to um, distributors, and it was just super exciting, and I have those connections forever. If I want to reach out to them and say, hey, how are you, and have a cup of coffee, I can. You just meet friends, you meet people. I think that's what the most fun about is film festivals.
No, I
Yeah.
definitely agree with you. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Christopher, as well. I was going to tease you, Christopher, about having friends that are filmmakers, because you are right. When they are filmmakers and they're your friends, they have a habit of sticking you in roles. Because I would never, ever claim to be an actor, but I've definitely had at least two times that a friend has stuck me in films. Because one friend was doing kind of a takeoff of the whole Who's That Budweiser commercials and everything, but they were doing a female version of that, and they stuck me in as the nosy neighbor. And then another friend who's actually done a telenovela was doing a commercial for Duke, and they stuck me in as like kind of a walk by attendee of the hospitals before workers in the hospitals became a thing because of the pandemic, and then being seen as emergency workers, and definitely some of our unsung heroes. So I know that that's at least twice that that's happened, including some theater time. So sometimes you filmmakers just kind of grab your friends and make us actors even when we're not.
Well, and actually, considering this is the Gamers Den, I was actually a co-writer on a YouTube series called Mario Warfare, which was based on the Super Mario games, where they made it into like a live action series. They actually also edited it together as a movie, and which was a lot of fun because there's a lot of references to other movies in there. Because there's there's a bit about the Smash Club, which is and we do like a variation of Fight Club where it's Smash Club, and there's references to James Bond and stuff. And in the process of making that, I wanted to. I don't mind playing a villain, so I got to play a really villain who gets to shoot Mario at some point. So I was kind of happy to do that. Although I did realize that like a lot of my friends who are part of that do a lot of stunt work, and I'm too old for stunt work. My knees aren't as good as they used to be, and I leave that to the real actors. But yeah, it is kind of funny. I mean, actually, my film Knobgoblins that I made, there's a filmmaker friend of mine that I cast in a role in that as well. So it is kind of weird how it's very. Sometimes you work with a lot of people who are behind the camera, in front of the camera. But yeah, there sometimes there's opportunities, but I had too much of a goofy mug to be able to be in front of the camera to make it a good thing. So I'd rather stay behind the camera and use my abilities to the best of their ability. If that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Hey, Bianca, what are some of the unusual roles? Because you did mention that not just a filmmaker, but you're also a actress as well, and definitely have some other talent. So, what are some of the craziest roles that you've had that folks might be shocked to learn about, or that you have fun even reflecting on in your acting career that you've had so far?
So a lot of the times with the Amazon show that I worked with, the Graceful Path, um, my director liked putting all the interns at least into one role, like small role that had like a few lines. And so um, there was a scene with a bunch of teenagers. And so at the time I was a young girl, so they put me in that role. And it was funny because I was supposed to be like a rebel, and I was supposed to be like, oh my God, you're like, I don't, and it was just so funny because everyone was laughing because I'm not like that. And so I had like dark makeup and everything. And another funny role that I had that I worked on with one of my friends, they were doing their last project in senior year of college, and they needed a young girl. And at that time, I was friends with them, so they're like, can you do this?" And so I turned into this like weird monster thing. They had like they did. Someone was behind me, and I had blood coming from my eyes, and they had fake horns come out of the beanie, and they were like, someone was behind me pushing it up, and so it was really funny. It was like middle of the night. We went. It was like a camping thing, and so that was pretty fun.
Sounds like it sounds truly amazing. As a teenager, do you sometimes get frustrated when you see those teen movies? Because even as a adult, well into my 50s, sometimes when I watch teen movies or teen TV series, it's kind of like those horror movies. I'm going like, no teenager would ever be that way. No teenager would
Yeah.
ever act that way and everything, or none that I knew when I was a teenager. So when you watch those shows as a teenager, do you sometimes find them a little bit over the top?
I find them cringy. Like watching a lot of the Netflix series made for teenagers. I'm just like, this isn't how we act. Or knowing my friends and everybody, I know that's just over the top and weird, and dramatic, very dramatic. Or like those parties, you being a high schooler, like, oh, party, taking drugs. I'm like, no one actually does that.
Yeah,
I think they just romanticize it for younger people that are going into high school. It's not good.
yeah, I can definitely see that. Christopher, what are your thoughts about it when you see films like that of the teenagers, or even I would argue sometimes that they don't do the greatest job of portraying people in what would be considered midlife, whether that's the 40s or the 50s or whatever you want to consider midlife. But I don't know that they necessarily do a great job of that either. So, what are your thoughts when you watch some of the TV shows and you're going like, I know that's how they're portraying us, but that's not really us.
Well, I think that's a common occurrence no matter what type of person you are, what type of job you are. I mean, I have a degree in computer science, and it always irritated me, like when you have somebody hacking, they're like, they just hit a few keys and they've hacked the government computer. It's like, no, that's not going to work like that. But yeah, I mean, I think sometimes they do have to add entertainment value, because sometimes if you made it extremely realistic as to how young people are, it might be kind of boring. you know, it's like I used to be a big fan of Dawson's Creek when it came on, mainly because the kids basically had a better vocabulary than some adults do, and no kid talks like that. Yeah, and sometimes it feels like it's a caricature of what a kid should be. Although there's a horror film called Spontaneous that for the first time it felt like it got kids right. You know, it seemed very realistic in its portrayal of the different characters. And you know, although I grew up during the John Hughes era of like the way young people are supposed to be portrayed, and you know, some of that's does hit you in the right spot, and sometimes you're like, oh, that's more of a caricature of how these different people are. But yeah, I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to, with Backward Creep, that's why I wanted to have cosplayers as the characters, because I think a lot of times when you show cosplayers in movies, it's more of a joke or a bit. Oh, this person in their free time wears a geeky costume. And a lot of my friends who are just upstanding people, you know, they love doing that. They go off to convention. Like I go to Dragon Con in Atlanta usually every year, although it was canceled because of COVID last year. But And you see some of the most amazing cosplay, and you have people from different backgrounds, normal people who work in an office, people that you wouldn't normally think would be walking around in these extravagant costumes that they a lot of times worked on for a year. And they're just more than just being some character or some bit for a joke. They're normal people. And I wanted to show a realistic aspect of that, instead of it just being like a two-dimensional person. So yeah, I think somebody on Facebook put a question recently, like what jobs do they get right in movies? Because most jobs are not like that. It's like Friends. You have these people living in this extravagant apartment that you couldn't afford if you lived in New York City.
But I think the ones that are most realistic are the most interesting, like The Office. Mm-hmm. That's pretty realistic. There's Superstore. That's pretty realistic. I think those are also really interesting. And I don't know if you guys have watched this one yet, but it's The Mitchells vs. the Machines. It's a Netflix original movie. That is very realistic. I actually connected with those characters really fast, even though it was an animation. I think a lot of the times it's just romanticizing stuff instead of doing realistic, because realistic actually does really good sometimes if it's done right.
Well, and I think you can still have those sort of bigger than life things that happen, or they can still have funny parts of their characters. But the main thing is trying to connect on that level of realism when it comes to how people are, when it comes to relationships or families. And there's a lot of people who've been championing that film, its portrayal of this family and the element of diversity in certain aspects of it. With the young girl character being like a filmmaker type character, So there's a lot of things about that I think people are championing, because it does hit certain parts of it right when it comes to being realistic in its portrayal of how people interact, like in families and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think there's a way to do that. Because sometimes if you make it too realistic, or like No Man Land, you end up watching it and you're like, oh, I feel so down after watching this, because you realize certain lives that people live that are kind of like dark and.
Are you a cosplayer yourself?
Am I what?
A cosplayer yourself?
A reluctant cosplayer. I actually went viral for a little while there. I went to NC Comic-Con. I had friends that are cosplayers, and I had this idea. I saw Doctor Strange, and I was a big fan of Stranger Things, and I had this idea to create Doctor Stranger Things, where I combine the two. And instead of the Eye of Agamotto, I made the Eye of Ego Moto with an actual ego that I spray painted gold. And I wore like part of the pink dress and a cloak, and I did all that stuff, and I wore it there, and somebody took pictures of it, and it went viral to where the co-writer of Doctor Strange tweeted my picture.
Oh, wow.
And I actually have a cosplayer page, Doctor Stranger Things, I never thought I would ever create a cosplayer page, but I don't do it as much. I just don't.
It's fascinating. That
I'm a cosplayer as well.
Are you? Well, there you go.
Yeah, I have my wig right here.
I'm a lazier cosplayer. I don't really have the ability to create things like some of my friends who like sew all this stuff together and they create these intricate things, for their cosplays. And I admire that. But some of that stuff is more thrown together and hot glued. And
I'm curious. Have you seen Danganronpa?
I don't think I have.
I think you would really like it. From what I'm getting from you, from like things that you've told me and things that inspire you, Danganronpa is kind of a dark game. You should check it out.
What's the name of it again?
Danganronpa, Danganronpa.
It's interesting.
It's actually a video game. It's a video game.
Oh, it's a video game too. It's interesting y'all talking about the cosplay world,
and it's an anime as well.
Oh wow! Because years ago I went to a one of those events. It was actually, I think, revolving around, which one is the Klingons? That's Star Trek. But it actually was having a literal Klingon talent show. So me and friends of mine were going into the hotel, and we were shocked when we were seeing people actually having a talent show in Klingon. So, there's a whole language, it's a made up language, and they were literally doing the whole competition, the singing, the whole 9 yards in Klingon. So I think I stayed there for probably about 15, 20 minutes watching the talent show, and I've actually emceed some talent shows as well. But I was quite fascinated by the fact that these folks were dressed in outfit and singing in a language that doesn't really exist, but they were having a real serious fun.
It's crazy. I think there was even somebody who translated the Bible in Klingon, which is like, what? That's kind of ridiculous. I don't know why you would do that, but yeah, I mean, that's the fervor of it. It's like, to show you, like, I'm a huge fan of the TV show Hannibal,
Mhm.
and I actually had some cosplay friends who actually made me the mask that Will Graham wears
Oh
in like
wow.
season 2, and I actually cosplayed that at Dragon Con, although nobody really got my reference, although I did was able to meet up with fellow Hannibal cosplayers. But yeah,
I really like cons. There is like an amazing community. I have a cosplay group and we usually plan cosplays together. But I missed last year, but I go to about 4 cons a year in New Mexico. There's like about
oh
4
wow.
or 5 cons here.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Wow.
mean, I a lot of my friends are cosplayers, and that's how I met them, through cosplay organizations or meeting them at places like Dragon Con or some these or horror conventions and stuff. Yeah, it's some of the most creative people ever. In fact, Backward Creep, there's a cosplayer who actually creates cosplays, who created a Lolita dress from scratch
Oh
for
wow.
our villain, because our villain, I wanted to be almost like an anime Lolita type character, because her mask almost has like anime eyes, and she actually dressed the wig for it, and she created everything from scratch for it. So because I wanted something that just stood out for a specific character. um and I met her at a convention, because she had always had this booth where she would fix your cosplays. Her name is Elizabeth Caddy, and now she's started working on other people's films and stuff, creating costumes and stuff for their films.
I actually had a booth at a con because I'm an artist, and so I sold a lot of my art there. A lot of the people I'm actually, I know a lot of the main. I knew one of the artists for one of the Harley Quinn comic books. He actually gave me a few of his art pieces,
Oh, nice.
but I was right next to him, next to the booth, and it's just a community of people. When you're in booth, you get to meet everybody, and everybody kind of just gives you free things after the con's over. The amount of things that I have is crazy. That's why my room's all like, most of these things are actually from my friends. Actually, this pillow is
Oh
from the con.
man, Rick and Morty,
Yeah. One of my friends made it.
Oh
Scary
wow.
Terry.
Yeah, that was definitely interesting. Speaking of the cons and speaking of the John Hughes kind of categories and all of that, just out of curiosity, Christopher, you said you're a John Hughes fan. I actually remember those movies as well. So would you say you're more of a Breakfast Club or a Pretty in Pink kind of person in terms of your preference of the John Hughes films?
I'm more of Ferris Bueller than either of those. And I love the fear. I think Ferris Bueller is almost like a perfect film in how it's created. Because a lot of times people would look at narration as being lazy writing, and I think that's only one of the few instances where narration works. And yeah, I don't know. I just love that film so far, how it's crafted and that kind of thing. So I have to sort of detour to that specific film, because that's like that's my favorite John Hughes film.
Gotcha. Who are some of the other folks that have influenced both of you? So, like, who are your influences in filmmaking, whether it's documentaries or whether it's the more narrative kind of films? And that's for both you, Bianca, and you, Christopher. So, I guess I'll start with you, Bianca. Who are some
One
of
second,
your
I gotta look up the
film?
name.
All right. So, who goes, Christopher, while you're looking up the name?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of influences. I mean, growing up, my horror influences were Wes Craven and Sam Raimi. Evil Dead 2 is my favorite horror film ever. Growing up, when I was a teenager, Nightmare on Elm Street was a very popular thing. Freddy Krueger is my favorite horror villain. My mom was really worried because I had a corner in my room that was dedicated to Freddy stuff. I even had, my license plate was NITMARE. I had a little Freddy hanging from my rearview mirror, which is probably why I didn't have a girlfriend in high school, because I was such a weirdo horror lover. And then as I grew up, there's a lot of different filmmakers that influenced me. Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, I think, is a amazing film. Um, Tim Burton, David Cronenberg. A lot of my more current, that Guillermo del Toro is like one of my favorites. Edgar Wright, I think, he hasn't made a bad film. Him and Guillermo del Toro, I think, have made perfect films in my opinion. And in fact, I think a lot of the way I do things are influenced by their methods, whether it comes to the storytelling of Edgar Wright and how he works the visuals as part of that, and del Toro, how he's an intricate part of so many facets of the production design. It's like when you watch Crimson Peak and you realize he okayed like every piece of like wallpaper and their outfits and stuff. And I think when we went into Backward Creep, that was my Guillermo del Toro moment where I'm like, working with the costume designer would send me ideas like which blood splotch works best, how does this work best, or working with the effects guy. And so yeah, a lot of those with the like a visual sense to how they tell the story, those are the filmmakers that I gravitate towards and sometimes influenced by. Even things like TV series like Hannibal or Sherlock with Cumberbatch they do really cool things with transitions that my film Disengage, we actually try to copy transitions and how they did stuff in that. So I think a lot of that stuff, and Hannibal is one of the most beautiful shows ever on television and makes you feel like cannibalism might be cool. So the visuals of that I think really worked. So yeah, those are a lot of the different filmmakers that really influenced my art, and I'm continue to be influenced because I think you're only as good as your ability to learn as an artist and to challenge yourself to be better on your next project.
No doubt about that. Bianca, did you find out the name of the person you were looking for?
Yeah, don't know why I forgot it, but Ryan Murphy is one of my favorite directors.
American Horror Story.
Created American Horror Story, which is my all-time favorite show. Also worked with Scream Queens and Glee, which are also my favorite shows. Scream Queens is just mwah. And then the director of As Above, So Below is the same director as Blair Witch, which are my two favorite movies. I'm very inspired by horror movies. But like suspenseful ones, where Blair Witch and stuff like that. Yeah, I really just go off the top of my head. Forgot her name, but the director of Shirkers. I don't know if you guys watched that documentary. It is really good. It's about a movie that she created when she was in high school. About a serial killer. So that really inspired me. I really actually go off of poetry as well. I read a lot of poetry. I don't know how to say your name, but Carr is one of my favorite writers.
Wow. Yeah, that's really amazing. All of that. You got great folks that you're involved with and that you love and everything. One of the people I was hoping to invite, and I definitely will do that the next time that we get y'all on, and hopefully I'll have hopefully Jacoby will bring y'all back, because I've been fascinated by y'all's conversation. I know he would have been as well, but unfortunately he had some things going on. But I'm hoping to bring in John Howie. So I'd be curious to find out who some of the film score people, like film musicians, are that have influenced you as well. And the reason I'm saying that is because John Howie actually wrote the score along with Tiff Merritt to Jeepers Creepers, which y'all know is a classic horror camper film. And he's actually here in North Carolina. So I was wondering if there are people in other parts of the film industry that y'all have a great deal of respect for, not just the filmmakers. And I was using John as an example, since I know he wrote that score and is still collecting the royalties from Jeepers Creepers, even though that movie is very old in terms of its lineage and everything. But definitely he's still getting those royalty checks and definitely still enjoying what's going on with that. Because like I said, I think that movie may be celebrating its either 20th or 25th anniversary. But I was wondering if there were people in that score world that you are, or music or other parts of horror making that you are fans of.
I have a few bands that I listen to when I'm writing or drawing. Mother is one of my favorites. Mom Jeans is also another one. Mount Eddie and Sad Park. They're like very early indie alternative pop. I would say pop because they're like more for my age, but they are pretty punk alternative.
What about yourself, Christopher?
Yeah, I mean, I'm music's very important to me when it comes to my films and filmmaking. It's such an integral part of, especially horror films, and creating the atmosphere, or sometimes not using music to where it's all about the sound. And yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, I'm a big fan of Danny Elfman's scores to stuff. I think he's made some of the most iconic scores to movies ever made, from Batman to Beetlejuice. Howard Shore, I think a lot of his stuff, I think the Silence of the Lambs music is great. Drag Me to Hell, the score to that, I've actually used to temp scenes in films, because there's certain, because that film is so effective, and shows you that Sam Raimi hasn't lost his ability as a filmmaker to still scare you, even though he goes off and makes these big Hollywood films, and he comes back and does his little indie horror film. I think there's the score to It Follows, where they sort of brought back the synth scores from the 80s, which, as somebody who's a huge fan of 80s horror films, it was good to sort of see a resurgence in that, and integrated to where it's not just all like regular orchestral type stuff. And it's also interesting just watching Tarantino films. If you realize, a lot of times he doesn't use scores, he just uses music. I think his I forgot the name of it. His last Western or whatever, he actually did include music, but he also incorporated music from The Thing in it as well. So yeah, I think it's a lot of times you can use, I mean, Foodie, we actually used music from a or almost, I want to say rockabilly is the right word, but there's this band out of, I think, Tucson, who they allowed us to use some of their music, and so that helped to. It worked really well with certain scenes we did in that film, especially the end scene where the music starts and it works as a good ending to it. So I think it's very important to sort of like find music that really helps inhabit the scene, or helps to helps the characters to emote. There's a Disengaged, I think once we added the score to it, I actually cried watching my own scene, and I was like, wow, I guess I'm not all about the jokes. I can actually make something dramatic, and that really kind of impressed me. So it's just interesting once you add a music to it. It's like I have to edit to music. I can't edit to like to no sound. It actually has, because you need something that sort of helps to amp up the drama or the scares or even the comedy elements of what's happening on screen.
Definitely appreciate it. I know that one of my partners in crime, Toby's partners in crime, Kara has made a return, and I'm definitely glad she's back and everything.
Sorry, guys.
Taking care of family matters over there in Louisville and everything else. I'm glad that she was able to come back, and hopefully we'll have the whole team back in place next week. But one of the things I was going to ask both you, Christopher, as well as is how folks can reach you and how they can learn about the upcoming project. Because, like I said, it'll be a slightly abbreviated version, but you actually managed to go an hour and a half. So I did all that abbreviated and everything. So definitely, I would love to have ways that folks can reach you. And one of the things that just not all the shows that you do on Pod TV is give folks a chance to give their message of hope, their message of positivity. So if you want to do both of those within the same answer, that'll be cool. Bianca, you want to go first?
How can people reach you, and any final words? There you go.
So I have so I have a Instagram account for my art, rotten_mulk, MULK_, and my Twitch is rottenmulk. Same thing, just no spaces or periods. And on LinkedIn, I'm Bianca Mitchell.
Sounds great. What about you, Christopher? Any ways that folks can reach you, and any final words? And Bianca, if you've got any final words, we can also have those final words from you as well. And I'll see if Kara's got any, and then I'm just going to get us on out of here so that we can hopefully have the whole team back next week.
You can follow me on different social media platforms. Usually I like films on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. I'm on all those different platforms. You can also follow some of the movie stuff, Backward Creep, which would be on Instagram and Facebook, and also Worst Laid Plans, if you want to follow the page on that to see the as we progress in making, each person making their own segment of the anthology horror films. But yeah, I think the main thing is, like, if you have the passion and the heart and you love movies and you really want to tell your own stories, do it, even if it's just using your cell phone and or telling your own story, because it's, every filmmaker has their start. You can go look at Steven Spielberg, his 8 millimeter home films he did as a kid, where he told his own stories, and and then he went on to become one of the most famous filmmakers out there. So it's just all about just getting out there and doing it, even if it's for yourself, because a lot of time, in this crazy world, sometimes the best way to get past a lot of the darkness and the negativity is to create some positivity by telling your own stories and finding ways to be creative, and through that, I think, it's very helpful, in these woeful times. So yeah, get out there and do it.
What about you, Bianca? Any final thoughts that you want to share?
Keep creating. Honestly, you just don't be afraid what people say. If you like something, don't be afraid to create something. Yeah.
No doubt
Art
about
is art.
that. Kara, any last words you want to share with folks and anything? So anything you want to bring into the conversation?
I'm just sorry I've been out of it and also causing the echoing apparently. But I will definitely take down your contact info and just reach out to both of you directly. I just appreciate you both being on. And like, I can't wait to hear the replay back and really listen to your story. So you two have been incredible, and thank you so much.
Yep, definitely appreciate all the things that you've shared, even things talking about diversity, which I know is very important to Jatovi, and the other things that we've touched on, even about improv and other things that are very important to our primary host, Mr. Jatovi McDuffie, and hopefully he'll be back along with Siren next week, and we'll have some more great conversations. I know one of the things that he always does, or we try to do on a regular basis, is let folks know that they're part of a bigger family here on the Gamers Den. So consider yourselves part of that family, and we look to have y'all come back in future episodes as well to share what y'all are doing and how the community can help y'all as well. So a lot of times, whether you're a filmmaker or any sort of creative, you need to get that fundraising element also. So hopefully folks are hearing your stories and they'll reach out to you, because definitely that is a vital part of what goes on in filmmaking. So if you're hearing their stories and you want to give some support to them, I don't think that Christopher or Bianca will mind at all if you make donations to their cause. As a matter of fact, Christopher is shaking his head like, please send me money right now. I can definitely use it, and all of that. So I think Bianca would definitely agree with the same thought as well. So on that note, I'm going to bring that lovely intro, outro into the process, get us on out of here. Like I said, it's a slightly abbreviated version, but me and Kara definitely tried to keep it rolling until we get the rest of the team, including the main boss, Jatovi, right back here in the seat that he belongs. So right now, we're going to get on out of here.